On a cool autumn morning in 2005, in the high desert country of New Mexico, where the air thins and the sky stretches endlessly above ancient mesas, a young woman named Isabella Cordova left her modest apartment in the town of Española to run errands she would never complete. She was 23 years old, a recent graduate from northern New Mexico College, working part-time at a local pharmacy while saving money for graduate school. She had dark hair that fell past her shoulders, a quick smile that friends remembered vividly, and a habit of calling her mother every evening without fail. On October 14, 2005, that call never came. Her car was found 3 days later, abandoned on a dirt road 20 miles outside of town, keys still in the ignition, her purse on the passenger seat, and no sign of Isabella anywhere. For 19 years, her disappearance remained a mystery that haunted the community, whispered about in diners and discussed in hushed tones at church gatherings. Until a shocking arrest in 2024 finally brought answers that few had expected, and even fewer wanted to believe. What happened to Isabella Cordova on that October day? And why did it take nearly 2 decades for the truth to emerge from the silence? Española sits in the heart of northern New Mexico, cradled between the Jemez Mountains to the west and the Sangre de Cristo Range to the east. It is a town of approximately 10,000 souls, a place where adobe buildings line streets named for saints, where 3 cultures, Native American, Hispanic, and Anglo, have intermingled for generations, creating a community both tightly knit and complex. The economy in 2005 revolved around small businesses, government jobs, and the service industry that catered to tourists heading to nearby Taos or Los Alamos. It was not a wealthy place. Many families struggled, but it was home, and people looked after one another with a fierce loyalty born of shared history and shared hardship. Isabella Maria Cordova had been born in this town on a spring morning in 1982. She was the youngest of 3 children raised by Maria Elena Cordova, a devoted single mother who worked double shifts as a nurse's aide at the regional medical center to provide for her family. Isabella's father had left when she was still an infant, a detail that Maria Elena rarely discussed, but that shaped the household in invisible ways. Isabella's older brothers, Miguel and David, had taken on protective roles early, walking their sister to school, warning away boys they deemed unworthy, teaching her to be cautious in a world that could be harsh to young women. Those who knew Isabella described her as studious and determined. She had graduated high school with honors despite working evenings at a fast food restaurant to help with bills. She was quiet in groups but warm in one-on-one conversations, the kind of person who remembered birthdays and checked in on elderly neighbors. She loved reading, particularly mystery novels, and kept a journal filled with observations about people and places around her. Her apartment, a small 1-bedroom unit above a hardware store on Riverside Drive, was decorated with thrift store furniture she had refinished herself and plants she tended with meticulous care. On the morning of October 14, 2005, Isabella woke at 7:30. The sun had just begun to paint the eastern mountains in shades of amber and rose. The temperature hovered around 45 degrees, typical for autumn in the high desert, with a crisp clarity to the air that made distant peaks seem close enough to touch. Isabella showered, dressed in jeans and a green sweater her mother had given her for her birthday, and made coffee in the small pot that sat on her kitchen counter. She had the day off from the pharmacy and had planned a series of errands: deposit her paycheck at the credit union, pick up groceries at the Furr's supermarket, and stop by her mother's house to drop off some paperwork related to a medical bill. At 8:45, according to the testimony of her downstairs neighbor, Mrs. Anita Romero, Isabella came down the exterior stairs carrying her purse and a reusable shopping bag. Mrs. Romero, who was sweeping the sidewalk in front of the hardware store, exchanged greetings with her. She seemed perfectly normal, Mrs. Romero would later tell investigators. Happy, even. She said she was looking forward to having lunch with her mother later. She smiled and waved as she got into her car. The car was a 1998 Toyota Corolla, silver, with a small dent in the rear bumper from a parking lot incident the previous year. Isabella drove north on Riverside Drive, stopped at the credit union on Paseo de Oñate at approximately 9 o'clock, confirmed by the timestamp on her deposit slip, and then proceeded toward the Furs supermarket on the southern edge of town. She was seen entering the store at 9:20 by the security cameras positioned above the entrance. She purchased milk, bread, vegetables, and chicken, paying with her debit card at 9:43. The cashier, a woman named Linda Martinez who had gone to high school with Isabella's brother Miguel, remembered the transaction clearly. "We chatted about her classes," Linda would recall. She was thinking about applying to graduate programs in social work. She wanted to help people. That was Isabella. Isabella loaded her groceries into her car and drove away from the supermarket parking lot at 9:50. This was the last confirmed sighting of her by someone who knew her personally. What happened in the next hours would become the subject of intense investigation, speculation, and ultimately, a carefully constructed web of deception that would take 19 years to unravel. Her mother, Maria Elena, became concerned when Isabella did not arrive for lunch at 12:30 as planned. She called her daughter's cell phone repeatedly, but each call went to voicemail. By 2 o'clock, Maria Elena had driven to Isabella's apartment and found it locked, with no sign of her daughter. She called Miguel, who lived 15 minutes away, and together they began calling Isabella's friends and checking the places she frequented. By 5 o'clock, with still no word, they contacted the Española police department to report her missing. The responding officer, Patrolman James Sandoval, took the report seriously despite the relatively short time frame. "In cases involving young women," he would later write in his incident report, "the first hours are critical." The family's concern was palpable, and their description of Isabella as someone who always communicated her whereabouts suggested that this absence was highly unusual. A missing persons bulletin was issued that evening, and officers began checking hospitals, calling tow companies, and alerting neighboring jurisdictions. The search intensified over the following days. Volunteers from the community, many of them members of Maria Elena's church, organized teams to canvass neighborhoods and search rural areas. Flyers with Isabella's photograph were posted on utility poles, distributed to businesses, and shared with media outlets. The local television stations ran stories during their evening broadcasts. Tips came in, but none led anywhere concrete. Someone thought they saw a silver Toyota heading north on Highway 84 toward Chama. Another caller reported seeing a young woman matching Isabella's description at a gas station in Santa Fe, but security footage showed it was someone else entirely. On October 17, 3 days after Isabella's disappearance, a rancher named Thomas Begay was checking fence lines on his property off County Road 113, a remote dirt road that wound through scrub-covered hills northwest of Española. He spotted a vehicle pulled off the road, partially concealed behind a stand of juniper trees. He approached cautiously, thinking it might be abandoned, and recognized it as the Toyota described in the news reports. He immediately called the police. Deputies arrived within 20 minutes. The car sat approximately 30 yards from the road, accessible via a rough path that showed tire tracks in the sandy soil. The driver's door was closed but unlocked. Inside, investigators found Isabella's purse containing her wallet with identification and credit cards, $47 in cash, and her cell phone, which was powered off. The groceries she had purchased were still in cloth bags in the backseat, though the perishables had spoiled in the warm afternoon sun over the past 3 days. The keys remained in the ignition, turned to the off position. There were no signs of a struggle inside the vehicle, no blood, no torn clothing, no indication of violence, but Isabella was gone. Part 2. The investigation. The discovery of Isabella's car transformed the investigation from a missing persons case into something more ominous. Detective Robert Chen of the Española Police Department, a 15-year veteran with experience in both property crimes and violent offenses, was assigned as lead investigator. He arrived at the scene on County Road 113, while the afternoon sun still hung above the western mountains, casting long shadows across the juniper-dotted landscape. Clear's throat, Detective Chen walked a careful perimeter around the vehicle, noting everything. The tire tracks leading from the road to the car's resting place appeared to match the Toyota's tires. There were no other obvious vehicle tracks in the immediate vicinity, though the hard-packed earth and scattered gravel made tracking difficult. He observed that the car had been driven deliberately to this location, not pushed or towed. The ground around the driver's door showed what might have been footprints, but the sandy soil had been disturbed by wind, and the impressions were unclear. Inside the car, beyond the personal items already noted, Chen found a receipt from the supermarket tucked into the center console, time-stamped at 9:43 on the morning of October 14. The odometer reading was documented and would later be compared against the mileage recorded during Isabella's last oil change 3 weeks earlier. The difference suggested she had driven approximately 73 miles since that service appointment. Chen calculated the distances. Isabella's apartment to the credit union, approximately 2 miles. Credit union to supermarket, approximately 4 miles. Supermarket to this location on County Road 113, approximately 11 miles via the most direct route. That accounted for roughly 34 miles round trip if she had made multiple trips. The additional 39 miles suggested other travel, but where? The crime scene unit processed the vehicle meticulously. They dusted for fingerprints, collected fiber samples from the seats, and photographed every inch of the interior and exterior. They found Isabella's fingerprints throughout, as expected, but also several unidentified prints on the passenger side, door handle, and dashboard. These would be entered into databases, but no immediate matches emerged. A few strands of hair were collected from the headrest, but DNA analysis in 2005 was time-consuming and expensive, reserved for cases with clear criminal activity. Search teams expanded their operations. Volunteers organized by the local search and rescue coordinator, a retired teacher named Patricia Valdez, combed the area within a 5-mile radius of where the car was found. They walked in careful lines through the scrub brush, eyes scanning for any sign, a piece of clothing, a shoe, any indication of where Isabella might have gone or been taken. Bloodhounds were brought in from Albuquerque. The dogs picked up a scent trail from the car that led approximately 200 yards northeast toward a small arroyo, then seemed to dissipate. Whether this meant Isabella had walked that direction or someone had carried something of hers that way, no one could say with certainty. The community response was immediate and overwhelming. Maria Elena Cordova became the public face of the search, appearing on local news broadcasts, pleading for information, for her daughter's safe return. Her voice would crack during these appearances, but she maintained a composure born of desperate hope. Miguel and David organized volunteer shifts, coordinated with law enforcement, and distributed flyers throughout northern New Mexico and southern Colorado. The family established a tip line. Donations for a reward fund came in from neighbors, church members, Even strangers moved by the story. Detective Chen and his team conducted interviews with everyone in Isabella's life. Friends described her as responsible and careful, someone who would never simply vanish without telling her family. Co-workers at the pharmacy reported nothing unusual in the days leading up to her disappearance. Her professors at Northern New Mexico College noted she had been attending classes regularly and performing well academically. Ex-boyfriends were questioned and cleared. There had been no recent conflicts, no threats, no indication she was involved in anything dangerous. But as the investigation progressed, Chen began to focus on a particular relationship, one that initially seemed peripheral but gradually moved toward the center of his inquiry. Isabella had been seeing someone, though seeing might be too strong a word. It was casual, according to friends, not quite a relationship but more than mere friendship. His name was Marcus Webb. Marcus Edward Webb was 31 years old in 2005, 8 years older than Isabella. He had moved to Española 2 years earlier from Albuquerque, taking a position as a manager at an auto parts store on Riverside Drive, 3 blocks from Isabella's apartment. He was tall, approximately 6 feet 2 inches, with sandy brown hair he kept short, a lean build, and a manner that people described variously as charming or intense, depending on who was asked. He rented a small house on the east side of town, lived alone, and kept largely to himself outside of work. Isabella's friends offered conflicting accounts of how serious the relationship was. Some said Isabella had mentioned Marcus only a few times, that they had gone out for coffee or dinner occasionally, but nothing more. Others suggested there had been more to it, that Isabella had seemed interested but also uncertain, that Marcus had pursued her more aggressively than she was entirely comfortable with. One friend, Rebecca Tafoya, told investigators that Isabella had mentioned feeling pressured. She said he wanted to get more serious, but she wasn't sure, Rebecca recalled. She said he would show up at places she went, like he was keeping track of her. It made her a little uncomfortable, but she also said he was nice enough, that maybe she was being paranoid. Detective Chen interviewed Marcus Webb on October 19, 5 days after Isabella's disappearance. The interview took place at the police station, and Marcus came voluntarily, saying he wanted to help in any way he could. Chen noted in his report that Marcus appeared calm, cooperative, and appropriately concerned. He wore khaki pants and a button-down shirt, as if he had come directly from work, which he confirmed he had. "I only went out with Isabella a couple of times," Marcus told Chen, according to the transcript. "We had coffee maybe 3 or 4 times over the past month, dinner once. She was a sweet girl, but I don't think she was looking for anything serious, and neither was I, really. We just enjoyed talking." Chen asked about the last time Marcus had seen Isabella. Marcus said it had been approximately a week before her disappearance, when they had run into each other at a convenience store. They had chatted briefly, and that was it. Chen asked where Marcus had been on October 14. Marcus provided what seemed like a straightforward account. He had worked his regular shift at the auto parts store from 8 in the morning until 5 in the afternoon. His manager and several coworkers could confirm his presence. After work, he had gone home, made dinner, and watched television. He lived alone, so no one could verify his whereabouts after 5, but he seemed unconcerned about this gap in his alibi. Those who knew him said Marcus was well liked at work, Chen would later tell colleagues. His manager described him as reliable, professional, someone who showed up on time and did his job well. But there was something about the interview that bothered me. He was almost too calm. Most people, when questioned about a missing person they know, show more emotion, worry, nervousness, eagerness to help. Marcus showed none of that. He was flat. Measured, Chen requested permission to search Marcus's house and vehicle. Marcus agreed without hesitation, even signing a consent form. The search conducted on October 21 revealed nothing obviously incriminating. The house was neat, sparsely furnished, ordinary. No signs of violence, no bloodstains, nothing hidden. His vehicle, a 2002 Ford pickup truck, was similarly unremarkable. It had been recently cleaned, both inside and out, which Marcus explained was just his habit. He liked to keep his truck clean. Forensic examination would find no evidence of Isabella having been in the vehicle. Chen also requested Marcus's cell phone records and his work timesheets. The records showed several calls between Marcus's phone and Isabella's in the weeks leading up to her disappearance, but none on October 14 itself. The work timesheet showed Marcus had clocked in at 8:02 a.m. and clocked out at 5:04 p.m. on that day, consistent with his statement. Yet inconsistencies began to emerge, small things that didn't quite fit. A customer at the auto parts store, Thomas Gutierrez, mentioned to police that he had come in around lunchtime on October 14 and had not seen Marcus. Another employee, Daniel Ortiz, when questioned more carefully, said he thought Marcus might have been gone for part of the afternoon, maybe running errands for the store, though he couldn't remember specifically. The manager, when pressed, admitted that Marcus had flexible duties that sometimes took him out of the store, and that the timesheet system was somewhat informal. Employees could clock in and out without constant supervision. Chen calculated the timing. If Marcus had left work, say, at 9:30 or 10 in the morning, he could have driven to the location where Isabella's car was found in approximately 15 minutes. He could have encountered her, perhaps by arrangement or by following her. Something could have happened there. He could have returned to work by early afternoon, and few would have noticed his absence in the midday lull. It was possible, but possibility was not proof. Deputies whispered quietly among themselves about Marcus Webb. Some felt certain he was involved. Others cautioned against tunnel vision, noting that there was no physical evidence connecting him to the crime scene, no witnesses placing him there, no clear motive. Isabella's family harbored their own suspicions. Miguel Cordova told Chen that he had never liked Marcus, that something about him felt off, but he had no concrete reason beyond intuition. As October turned to November and then to December, the investigation began to slow. Every lead had been pursued, every tip investigated. Searches of the surrounding terrain continued sporadically, but the vast expanse of New Mexico wilderness made finding anything, or anyone, extremely difficult. Isabella's face remained on flyers that gradually faded in windows and on poles, a reminder of a question without an answer. Detective Chen maintained the case file, updated it when new information trickled in, but there were no breakthroughs. The case, for all practical purposes, went cold. Part 3. The silence. The months that followed Isabella's disappearance settled like dust over the Cordova family, a fine layer of grief and uncertainty that coated everything. Maria Elena continued to work her shifts at the medical center, caring for patients with the same diligence she always had, but those who knew her noticed changes. She grew quieter. The easy warmth that had once characterized her interactions became muted. She attended Mass at Our Lady of Sorrows Catholic Church every morning before work, lighting candles, praying for her daughter's return or, at minimum, for answers. Miguel and David returned to their own lives, though both carried the absence of their sister like a physical weight. Miguel, who worked in construction, threw himself into long hours, arriving at job sites before dawn and leaving after dark, as if exhausting his body might quiet his mind. David, a mechanic, became more withdrawn, declining invitations from friends, spending evenings alone in his apartment. The brothers spoke less frequently than they once had, as if avoiding each other somehow made the loss more bearable. as if seeing their shared grief reflected in each other's eyes was too much to endure. For those who have ever doubted someone you love, who have felt the gnawing suspicion that something terrible has happened but lacked any proof, any concrete evidence to validate your fears, the experience is a particular kind of torment. You cannot grieve properly because there has been no confirmation of ending. You cannot move forward because the possibility of return, however slim, remains. You exist in a limbo, suspended between hope and despair, and that suspension can last for years. Time moved differently for the family. Days blurred together, marked not by normal rhythms of work and rest, but by the constant undercurrent of Isabella's absence. Birthdays came and went. Isabella turned 24, then 25, though she was not there to celebrate. Maria Elena set a place at the table on holidays, unable to fully accept that her daughter would not walk through the door. She kept Isabella's apartment untouched for 8 months, paying the rent until financial reality forced her to pack up her daughter's belongings. Each item, the refinished furniture, the thriving plants, the journals filled with careful handwriting, went into storage, waiting for an ending that never came. In February 2006, 4 months after Isabella's disappearance, Detective Chen received a call from a woman who had been camping in Carson National Forest, about 30 miles north of where Isabella's car had been found. Hikers had discovered skeletal remains in a remote ravine. Chen's heart had quickened. He coordinated with the New Mexico State Police and the Office of the Medical Investigator. A recovery team was dispatched. The remains were carefully excavated and transported to Albuquerque for examination. Days of waiting followed, the family once again caught in that awful suspension between knowing and not knowing. The OMI's report finally came. The remains belonged to a male, likely in his 50s, who had been deceased for at least several years. Not Isabella. The Cordovas sank back into their waiting. Marcus Webb continued living in Española. He remained employed at the auto parts store, maintained his routine, participated in the community in small ways. Some residents avoided him, convinced of his involvement despite the lack of charges. Others defended him, arguing that suspicion without evidence was unfair, that the man deserved the presumption of innocence. Marcus himself rarely spoke about Isabella publicly. When asked by neighbors or customers, he would express sadness about her disappearance and hope that she would be found, but his affect remained oddly flat, his words seeming rehearsed rather than heartfelt. In 2008, Marcus Webb began a relationship with a woman named Jennifer Carlson. Jennifer was 26, a dental hygienist who had recently moved to Española from Denver. She was blonde, petite, outgoing in a way that Marcus was not. They met at a community event, and friends described their relationship as surprising. Marcus had always seemed solitary, and suddenly he was part of a couple. They dated for 6 months before moving in together. They married in a small ceremony in 2009. Jennifer seemed unaware of or unconcerned about the suspicions that some in the community held regarding her husband. "He's a good man," she told a coworker who gently raised the subject of Isabella Cordova. "People need someone to blame because they don't have answers." But Marcus had nothing to do with that poor girl's disappearance. The marriage seemed stable at first. Marcus and Jennifer bought a small house on Cal de la Luz, a quiet street lined with cottonwood trees. Jennifer became pregnant in 2010, and their daughter, Emma, was born that October. Marcus appeared to embrace fatherhood, at least outwardly. He was seen pushing the stroller through the park, attending toddler classes at the library, doing the things fathers do. The family attended community events. Jennifer made friends, joined a book club, integrated into Española society in ways Marcus never had on his own. But those closest to Jennifer began noticing cracks in the facade by 2012. She confided to a friend, Susan Marquez, that Marcus had become increasingly controlling. He monitored her phone, questioned where she went and whom she spoke with, reacted with anger when she made plans without his prior approval. "He wants to know where I am every minute," Jennifer told Susan over coffee one afternoon. "If I'm 10 minutes late coming home from work, he calls multiple times. He says it's because he worries, but it feels like surveillance." Jennifer also mentioned that Marcus had difficulty sleeping. He had nightmares that woke him several times a week, though he would never tell her what they were about. He would sit up in bed, breathing hard, sometimes crying out words she couldn't quite make out. When she asked, he dismissed it as stress, work-related anxiety, nothing serious. But the nightmares persisted year after year, a disturbance in the quiet house on Cal de la Luz. Their daughter, Emma, was a bright, observant child. By the time she was 4 years old, in 2014, she had begun drawing pictures, as children do, stick figures of her family, houses with flowers, the sun smiling down. But some of her drawings troubled Jennifer. In one, Emma had drawn several figures and when asked to identify them, pointed to the usual family members, Mommy, Daddy, Emma, and then to another figure, separate from the family group, lying down with what appeared to be red scribbles around it. "Who's that?" Jennifer had asked, trying to keep her voice light. Emma had shrugged. "Just a lady," she said, and went back to coloring. Jennifer didn't mention this to Marcus. Increasingly, there were things she didn't mention to him. The marriage had become a performance, a careful navigation of his moods and reactions. She considered leaving but felt trapped by circumstance, financial dependence, concern about custody, the fear that comes with knowing someone might not react well to being left. For those who have ever felt that you cannot trust your own judgment, who have wondered whether your fears are legitimate or whether you are simply being paranoid, the experience is isolating and exhausting. In 2015, Jennifer finally confided in her sister, Rachel, who lived in Colorado Springs. She described the controlling behavior, the surveillance, the nightmares, the feeling that something was fundamentally wrong in her marriage even though she couldn't articulate exactly what it was. Rachel urged her to consider separation, to consult a lawyer, to make a plan for leaving safely. Jennifer promised she would think about it but took no immediate action. The breaking point came in March 2016. Emma, who was now 5.5, had a friend over for a playdate. The two girls were playing in Emma's room when Jennifer overheard their conversation. Emma was telling her friend a story, speaking in the matter-of-fact way children do. "My daddy told me a secret," Emma said. "He said sometimes people go away and they don't come back, and we have to keep it a secret where they went." Jennifer's blood had chilled. She stood outside the door listening. The friend asked what the secret was. Emma paused, then said, "I'm not supposed to tell. Daddy said if I tell, bad things will happen." Then she changed the subject and the girls returned to their game. That evening, after Emma was asleep, Jennifer confronted Marcus. She asked him what he had told their daughter, why Emma was talking about secrets and people going away. Marcus's reaction was immediate and aggressive. He accused Jennifer of spying on him, of trying to turn Emma against him, of being paranoid and unstable. The argument escalated. For the first time, Jennifer felt genuinely afraid of her husband. Something in his eyes when he was angry was utterly cold, devoid of the person she thought she had married. Jennifer took Emma and left that night, driving to a friend's house. Over the following weeks, she consulted an attorney and filed for separation. The legal proceedings were contentious. Marcus fought for custody, arguing that Jennifer was unfit, that she was mentally unstable. Jennifer, through her attorney, requested that Emma be interviewed by a child psychologist as part of the custody evaluation. It was during one of these interviews in June 2016 that Emma made a statement that would change everything. Part 4. The Revelation Doctor. Sarah Martinez was a licensed clinical psychologist who specialized in child psychology and family therapy. She had been appointed by the court to evaluate the Webb family situation and make recommendations regarding custody of Emma. Her office was in Santa Fe, a comfortable space decorated with toys and art supplies intended to put children at ease. On June 15, 2016, Emma Webb, who had just turned 5, sat at a small table with crayons and paper while Dr. Martinez asked her gentle questions about her family, her home, her feelings. The interview was recorded, as was standard practice, with both parents' knowledge and consent. For most of the session, Emma's responses were typical for a child her age. She talked about her favorite cartoons, her kindergarten teacher, her toys. Dr. Martinez eventually asked about her father, whether Emma missed seeing him every day now that her parents were separated. Emma nodded but said she also felt safer at her mother's house, though she couldn't articulate exactly why. Dr. Martinez, trained to notice what children struggle to express, asked if there was anything that made Emma feel unsafe at her father's house. Emma was quiet for a long time, coloring a picture. Then, without looking up, she said, "Daddy hurt a lady once." Dr. Martinez had kept her voice carefully neutral. "Can you tell me about that?" Emma continued coloring. "I'm not supposed to tell. It's a secret. Sometimes it's okay to tell secrets when they're about someone being hurt," Dr. Martinez said gently. "You won't be in trouble for telling me." What followed was not a dramatic confession or a perfectly articulated account. It was fragments, the way a 5-year-old understands and communicates complex, frightening information that she herself doesn't fully comprehend. Emma said her father had told her a story, more than once, about a lady who went away. He had described taking the lady to the desert place where nobody could find her. Emma said her father had seemed sad when he told the story, that he had cried once, which frightened her because she had rarely seen him cry. She said he told her it was their special secret and that telling anyone would mean bad people would take Daddy away forever. Clears throat. Dr. Martinez had immediately recognized the significance of what she was hearing. After the session, she contacted her supervisor and consulted the legal obligations for mandated reporting. The statement, vague as it was, suggested possible knowledge of a crime. Dr. Martinez notified Child Protective Services and, through them, law enforcement. The case landed on the desk of Detective Sarah Ortiz of the New Mexico State Police, Cold Case Unit. Detective Ortiz had been with the state police for 12 years and had worked cold cases for the past 5. She reviewed the old files from Isabella Cordova's disappearance, read Chen's reports, noted the suspicions that had never solidified into charges. Now, 11 years later, there was a new lead. The words of a child, unreliable in a courtroom perhaps, but compelling enough to reopen the investigation. Ortiz coordinated with the Rio Arriba County District Attorney's Office. They discussed strategy. The child's statement alone would not be sufficient for an arrest warrant, let alone a conviction. They needed more. Ortiz requested a review of all physical evidence collected in 2005. Hoping that advances in forensic technology might reveal something previously missed. She also initiated surveillance on Marcus Webb and sought a warrant for his financial records, phone records, and any other documentation that might establish his movements on October 14, 2005. The forensic review yielded a crucial development. The unidentified fingerprints found on Isabella's car in 2005 had been entered into AFIS, the Automated Fingerprint Identification System, but there had been no match at the time. By 2016, however, databases were more comprehensive and new comparison algorithms had been developed. When the prints were run again, they matched fingerprints on file for Marcus Edward Webb. His prints were on file because he had applied for a commercial driver's license in 2007, which required fingerprinting. The prints on Isabella's car placed Marcus inside or in contact with her vehicle, contradicting his statement that he had not seen her in the week before her disappearance. This was the break Ortiz needed. Combined with Emma's statement and the circumstantial evidence from 2005, she and the district attorney believed they had sufficient cause for an arrest. On November 3, 2016, nearly 11 years after Isabella Cordova's disappearance, officers arrested Marcus Webb at his workplace. He was charged with an open count of homicide, a legal mechanism used when a body has not been found, but evidence strongly suggests the victim is deceased and that foul play was involved. Marcus's arrest shocked those who had defended him and vindicated those who had long suspected his involvement. Media coverage was extensive. The Albuquerque Journal ran a front-page story. Local television stations sent reporters to Española to cover the developments. Maria Elena Cordova, now 62 years old and visibly aged by 11 years of uncertainty, appeared before cameras to express gratitude that the case was moving forward. Though her relief was tempered by the reality that her daughter's body had still not been found. "We may never know exactly what happened to Isabella," Maria Elena said, her voice steady despite the tears on her cheeks. "But knowing that someone is being held accountable, that the truth is finally coming out, brings a measure of peace. My daughter deserves justice. Every missing person deserves to be remembered, to be fought for." The legal proceedings were complex. Marcus Webb pled not guilty. His defense attorney, a seasoned criminal lawyer from Albuquerque named Richard Montoya, argued that the case was built on circumstantial evidence, fingerprints that could have been left at any time. The confused statements of a child too young to be a reliable witness, and decade-old suspicions that had never been substantiated. Montoya pointed out that without a body, without direct evidence of a crime, the prosecution's case was speculative at best. But the prosecution, led by Assistant District Attorney Lisa Fernandez, constructed a methodical argument. She walked the jury through the timeline of October 14, 2005, showing the gaps in Marcus's alibi, the inconsistencies in his statements, and the physical evidence of his contact with Isabella's vehicle. She called witnesses who testified to Marcus's controlling behavior in relationships, his obsessive interest in Isabella, and his documented lies to police. Dr. Martinez testified about Emma's statements, carefully presenting them within the appropriate legal framework. The trial, which began in April 2017, lasted 3 weeks. The jury, composed of 7 women and 5 men from across Rio Arriba County, deliberated for 4 days. Those who sat in the courtroom described the atmosphere as tense, the Cordova family seated on one side, Marcus's mother, his only visible supporter on the other, and Jennifer and Emma conspicuously absent, having relocated out of state for their safety and privacy. On May 12, 2017, the jury returned a verdict, guilty of second-degree homicide. Marcus Webb showed no reaction as the verdict was read, his face as expressionless as it had been during Detective Chen's interview more than a decade earlier. Maria Elena Cordova wept quietly, her sons on either side of her, their arms around their mother. Sentencing came 2 months later. Judge Maria Gonzalez, a respected jurist with 25 years on the bench, imposed a sentence of 20 years in state prison. In her remarks, she addressed Marcus directly. "You have robbed a family of their daughter, their sister. You have stolen years of their lives in which they have been unable to grieve properly, unable to find closure. Whether through pride or cowardice, you have refused to tell them where Isabella Cordova's remains are, denying them even the small comfort of laying her to rest. This court hopes that in time, your conscience will compel you to provide the answers this family deserves. Marcus Webb did not speak at his sentencing. He was led from the courtroom in handcuffs, transported to the New Mexico Corrections Department, and processed into the state prison system, where he remains incarcerated today.